All right. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Crypto Chelas. I'm Alicia, Delia. I'm the founder and CEO of the Buen Vivir Capital Institute, and we are a network of impact investors and funders and philanthropists looking to support SMEs globally, particularly in frontier markets. So I want to thank Jose Roberto, I want to thank Mija for inviting me to come today. My family and I moved to El Salvador about 4 years ago. My mother is originally from El Salvador, and it has been a wonderful, wonderful journey to come back. And this is just such a great platform to discuss the opportunities and possibilities here in El Salvador as we go through our journey of adoption and of enhancing best practices and learning from people in the field. So I'm excited to be having this conversation mostly because I think we share values around how money and capital flows can be decentralized, can be democratized. I think that's at the heartbeat of why this movement around crypto has become so captivating. The idea that there's room for new actors to take part in some of the value creation, and particularly for emerging economies, there's room for us to think outside of the box. And one of the things that I have appreciated about El Salvador is the desire to think outside of the box about economic mobility and about financial transformation. And it has been, I think, a rather successful journey, but one that still requires a lot of thought and community. And so thank you all for building a space for this community. So we are going to dive in. And I think one of the things that feels important to our organizers is that we also bring a bit of that disruptive spirit to our time together. So kind of unconferencing things. So we're going to have a conversation. We have incredible experts here, but then we want to have the crowd weigh in. We want you to talk to us about your experiences, because we all know that people here are the ones also who are experimenting and practicing and all of those things. So we really would like it to be dynamic. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, all right. So why don't we start with getting to know you three a little bit better and hearing about your work and what brought you to this movement. So I want to hear a little bit about the what and then the why behind why you're here and why this feels important to you.
Yeah, maybe if I kick things off, my name is Luka Paragi. I'm head of product at NAKA. I've been with NAKA for almost 10 years now. And actually what brought me into this space was looking at this technology and thinking about real-world utility. Apart from investment and trading, I was always more interested in how can we do better for the people? What can it enhance? And it even stems back to how I first got introduced to crypto. I bought Bitcoin the worst way possible. I bought it on an ATM, paid the largest fees, and my thinking wasn't, let me hold on to this, idiot, but it was, how can I use this? And I started Googling, and that was back 2015, and I started Googling and searching for how can I utilize this? This is the future peer-to-peer cash, right? And I found a service, got a coupon for Amazon, and bought something off Amazon. I was like, great, this works, this is awesome. So yeah, that was kind of my introduction.
Wonderful. Hello, Gabriel. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Hey, everyone. Well, thank you, NAKA, for inviting me, Jose Roberto, as well. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cubo. We're a payments platform and a digital platform for small and medium-sized businesses in Central America. A bit like Square in the US or Clip or Bold in Colombia. And my background and how I came up here is I lived 14 years outside El Salvador, and I came back to become an entrepreneur here because I see an opportunity to through technology, help the country and the whole region. I was born and raised here, moved throughout the world, and especially I worked at Uber for several years. I launched many of the markets in Latin America at Uber. And the first time I dealt with technologies, my interview at Uber was, we're launching El Salvador. How would you approach it? and a bit ignorant and cocky, I'd say I wouldn't launch it. It's not safe. It was back in 2014. Well, of course, I didn't get the job, but eventually I did get it. And I started working at Uber, launched several countries, and I saw how technology in emerging markets can really disrupt. And we are technology-driven people. The fact is, how do we make it efficient for people to use it? So after that experience, I was like, okay, there is a huge problem in financial services. Central America and El Salvador, we're not talking about a lack of financial inclusion, we're talking about financial exclusion. Like only 40% of people have a bank account. So I was like, wow, there is a big challenge there. I think I can help to tackle. So that's how we came up with the idea of launching Cubo, which we offer POS systems for small merchants. I came back, it's been four years. We operate in 3 countries. And very, very glad to share my experience and how I see all the crypto and DeFi ecosystem in the region.
Thank you. Daniel.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm Daniel Leiva. I'm partner at Torres Legal. I have been in fintech since 2016. And actually, what brought me here is it's kind of funny, but I used to work at a bank, and I was the senior lawyer in charge of the fintech product and the innovation product of the bank, and that's where I initially get to know Bitcoin, understand that the technology is something that can change the world and remove barriers from anything, and basically. That's where I fell in love with crypto itself, and the why is because in El Salvador, in many Latin American countries, you have a lot of financial inclusion, but it's not lack of potential, it's lack of financial education. So it was kind of hilarious actually that I was the lawyer preaching and teaching regarding fintech, and at my house, my mom didn't want to pay anything by the app of the bank because she wants to go to the cashier and take the physical signature with the stamp on it. And was like, okay, this is not that my mom is not, she was a judge and stuff and everything. Not is that my mom is not educated. Is that we need to change the mindset of the people because El Salvador is ready, but in order to take the adoption, we have to preach about it.
Thank you. A common thread that I'm hearing from all of you is the idea of inclusion, is the idea of taking structures, particularly financial mechanisms that I think in and of themselves are not highly inclusive, and seeing how more people can benefit, more people can participate. And I think that's one of the little known, or at least little talked about aspects when we look at crypto, is that dynamic. And so if we want that to be true, particularly in emerging economies like El Salvador, we do have to be very intentional about learning and truth-telling and what has worked and what hasn't. And so as El Salvador has adopted this and has the eyes of the world have watched, what would you say have been some of the successes, and what would you say have been some of the obstacles or the missteps that we should all be reflecting on as we continue to want to grow its successful adoption here and potentially other frontier markets as well?
I mean, although I really agree that if we're talking about financial inclusion, first of all, we need to understand that no one company, no one entity can solve this problem single-handedly. It takes a village, right? And the problem is very broad, and it needs specific tackling. Education, definitely, I agree, is an important part, plays a very important part. But we, on the other side, offering DeFi and blockchain services to people, have a commitment of not changing their user habits. So real adoption comes when their underlying technology is invisible. Let me repeat that. The underlying technology must be invisible. It needs to be a Web2 interaction. It needs to be something they are used to. And the user shouldn't care that it's running on blockchain. They just need to see the benefits oh, I get instant transactions, I get lower fees, oh, I get yield. That's awesome. Everything else comes later, in my opinion.
Yeah. Gabriel, what would you say?
To be fair, I'm not the crypto expert in the panel. We offered mostly card payments, which is fiat. But I think we've agreed that it's digitizing the payments or digitizing the financial ecosystem. And what are the wins and the lose? For me, it's not a black or white. Some people see it as a failure. Some people see it as a success. For me, it's how do you create value in some use cases, and that builds up the wins. For example, we've seen that crypto works very well in countries that there is a lot of inflation. That's not the case of El Salvador, or countries where there is a lot of remittances. That's the case of El Salvador, or for B2B payments with different currencies. So what I take from El Salvador is more, we're at the edge of innovation. We have a regulatory framework that is trying to push the boundaries, and it's too soon to say that it's a failure or it's a success. It's a matter of finding the use cases. In my case, I'll give you an example. We used to accept, we accepted crypto in our platform. But then we get so much scrutiny from our investors, from potential investors, because we accepted crypto in all the due diligence process, just because the logo was in our webpage, that we decided to take it out because it wasn't creating value for the medium-sized businesses and for our company. Having said that, I'm a firm believer in the technology. I hodl since 2015, and my use case is not the success. But me as a company, I move money to pay providers through the blockchain, because for my merchants, probably right now it doesn't add value, but for me, it adds enormous value. So yeah, agree. I would say it takes a village. Let's go for specific use cases, creating value. The user doesn't know how are you paying. What he wants is to have value in their day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're making an important point here. I think it's important to underline that blockchain in DeFi isn't a magic pill that solves all of the problems. It's about cooperation. Even if you come more from the traditional side, companies right now, we're dividing them into the DeFi companies and traditional companies. In a matter of years, we're not going to be talking about it. We will both be utilizing solutions. We need each other. So I think a final solution is a cooperation between the two, and that division needs to disappear. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that Gabriel is being too modest with what Cubo actually made, because it's finding actually use cases. And Gabriel was the first POS that actually went to the public markets and enabled micro and small businesses to actually accept credit cards. And he created the value of many people that had debit cards that are traditional employees and stuff, wants to buy or to pay the salon or to make their hair or to go to the public market and pay something with the card, but they couldn't because the people did not accept that. And Gabriel simplified that and eliminate the barriers in order for them to actually get more clients. And he was the one that actually changed that mindset in order to accept clients. And in order to take the product, and these use cases show us something, that Salvadorian itself are not an educated population. You just have to bring them the actual use case, because it's not, I'm going to charge you. I'm going to enable you to have more clients. That's the selling pitch that actually helped Gabriel to bring down to the streets a lot of POSs. But it happens the same with Bitcoin and crypto itself. For example, it's funny because many of us remember Cubo as a bad thing because it was the public platform and it had a lot of bugs and stuff. But Cubo actually taught us two things as a society. The first one is that the Salvadorian user is worth, in order to get the user, is worth $30, no more than that. And the other one, the cost per user actually, and the other one is that at least 70% of the population is ready to get a financial product, what is contrarious to the thesis, because prior to Cubo, we had the last report of financial inclusion was 7 of every 10 Salvadorian does not have any financial product. It means not a bank account, not an insurance product, not a credit card, nothing. But Cubo taught us that they are ready to get the financial product. They know how to use it. They know how to access. They know how to onboard. They just don't want it because they don't have the use cases. And then you have delivery guys, private delivery guys that tell you, hey, please pay me in Cubo. I don't want a bank account. And you saw that they were afraid of the banks because they charge you a lot. And it's kind of ironic because people was actually ready. The banks and the traditional players didn't have the actual products that make sense. And that's pretty hilarious, actually.
So the topic of banking the unbanked or providing alternative opportunities to individuals where there's a wide open market for a new financial product to come in and to be able to add value. What I've seen as an economist doing this globally is that it requires a high level of trust, right? So whenever we are attempting, even from banking financial services, whenever there's a new product, the reason why microfinance and other initiatives have been successful is because you build a relationship with a loan officer, they get to know you, they get to know your family. So if we're looking back and we're really centering the issue of trust and some of these lessons learned, Daniel, that you're surfacing, how do we change the trajectory or learn from those practices in order to build a more viable future where these products are introduced in a way that has a higher ability to provide trust? That's my first part of the question. And the second part would be about regulation. And what role, if any, did that play in some of the hesitancy around adaptation here in El Salvador? And how can that be looked at or tweaked so that, we have a balanced view of regulation, one that is kind of safeguarding consumer interests, but not thwarting progress? So trust and regulation, what do we think about that?
Yeah, anybody working in the financial space knows that trust takes a long time to get and only one mistake to lose it all, right? And the two topics that you mentioned are very tightly intertwined. If first we need clear regulations for companies to move in this space that don't want to be in the gray zone, so to speak. And it's I think it plays a very important part. And here I have to give props in my team to the legal department, who always works very close with local regulators. So that's the first thing, is that you need to underline to them, educate them what you're doing, how it works. They don't understand self-custody, they don't understand blockchain. And if you have the teams providing the product, explaining it initially to the regulators, getting their trust, and then moving down the chain. And then the next step, what is extremely important, is that we, offering the DeFi services, do our homework. Why? The end user is not gonna check who is your stablecoin issuer, what chain are you working on, is it decentralized enough or isn't it? If it fails, you will lose trust. So you need to do your homework and partner with the right companies, and especially not have a build-it-your-own mindset. I see, especially in the last year, everybody and their mother is launching a stablecoin. And, I think you need to have some specific intent and see what's on the market already, because there are some beautiful partnerships possible, and I think that's the right way to move forward.
Yeah, for me, talking about regulation, I was recently reading a paper about the case of Nigeria and the case of El Salvador, about how El Salvador, it appears like a top-down decision, and that's why it wasn't taken by the population, while in Nigeria it was more bottoms-up, so people needing to use crypto and DeFi for a lack of financial inclusion. And I think that's a simplistic way to put it. I think it is true up to a certain extent, but as an entrepreneur, you're always finding like what does really move the needle. And I think what El Salvador has done well, and we're not seeing we're planting the seeds and we haven't seen the result yet, is even if the decision was, yeah, the whole population needs to accept Bitcoin, there needs a regulatory framework to create the companies that are going to support the technology. And in some countries that are not pro-innovation, that's very hard. So I would say, let's give some time. Something will emerge if you have a good regulatory framework for the infrastructure. Eventually, the user is going to come if you don't have a natural pool. There are some markets that have a natural pool. Venezuela, Argentina, Nigeria. There is a pool because people need a better product than their currency. But in the case of El Salvador, that we have a strong currency with the dollar, or at least we're dollarized, I would say. I'm not sure if it's strong. Let's focus on the infrastructure. And yeah, I think that's something that I'm quite enthusiastic about what's coming ahead.
I do agree with both of these guys, and I do truly believe that each society is different and many can share common problems, like what actually Gabriel says. I mean, for example, you go to Bolivia and it's funny because you go to the supermarket and the price tag is in USDT because their problem was actually their own currency. Happens the same with Venezuela. Actually, the national currency of Venezuela is not Bolivar, it's USDT too, because they are actually solving a problem to the population. That's what happens with Gabriel POS that actually solves a problem for micro and small businesses. It's the same that happens with NAKA, with this POS, that actually you don't have to have 3 POSs in order to charge to your clients. You just have one POS. And happens the same with every product that you need in order to make it happen to the population itself. In El Salvador, you are seeing more and more products that fights against the inflation, and people are understanding that their money at the banks are losing value. So in order to put it in something that gives you money, it's something that makes more sense than having it within the bank. And regulators, I think El Salvador case regarding regulation is pretty a model for the world. You have a regulator that actually understands what it is happening, that it's ahead of the technologies itself. It's open. It is not a closed regulation that says you just can use ERC 3643 standard. No. You can use any standard. Just prove me that it can actually protect the system, because the system must be protected from AML risk, that consumers are protected from scams, and you comply with a safe technology. And that's the readiness that we have as a regulatory infrastructure or regulatory ecosystem. And it's good because you have the NAKA example. They are open with the regulator, and you have the regulator trying to reach the company, audit the company, understand what they are doing in order to be prepared to help or to protect the system or the ecosystem from bad actors. And we have, as companies, to work together with the regulator towards to actually help to protect the ecosystem from bad actors, actually.
So we've talked a little bit about kind of the end user, the small business, the everyday person. We also talked a little bit about the government and what it looks like to have a more bottom-up approach, a more top-down approach. Can we spend a little bit of time talking about, let's say, the global climate, mainstream opinion? How has that been shaped as we've had these examples, as we've had these successes, as we've had the ups and downs? What is still the sentiment in the world from everyday people about stablecoins, about crypto, to the extent that there is a knowledge and awareness, I would say that it's still very mixed. I would say that it's politicized. I would say that there's still kind of a global lack of awareness. There's still a view of it being an outsider's kind of renegade, fringe group of individuals, although in the United States, we're seeing people like Jamie Dimon and big banks and more moving into the space. But let's talk a little bit about the average person and how they see it as a movement. Maybe they're not using it themselves, but can you speak to a little bit about how you've seen that and maybe some shifts you've seen over the last 10 years about public opinion?
Well, yeah, I have a kind of a good example of how crypto and Bitcoin is perceived in the financial industry in general, and a good showing of this are actually blockchain events, right? I remember, 8 years ago going to these events. Basically, you had just crypto people, a bunch of people talking to each other, selling each other stuff. But as time progressed, you see more and more people from traditional finance joining in the conversation, participating. I know, let's say 5 years ago, we were saying, traditional financial institutions are dinosaurs and they're not adapting, but that's no longer the case. That's no longer true. They saw the value that, let's say, stablecoin infrastructure can bring, and a lot of banks and financial institutions are adopting stablecoin rails and this technology in general. So
what shifted?
Yeah. What shifted? I think taking the time to educate yourself, right? Being somebody, if you're a company from the traditional financial sector and you have this information about crypto, DeFi, blockchain, and how it's great and how it can value you, you need to go pretty deep down and understand what you get. Oh, I get a instant, cheap, programmable dollar. Cool, sounds fancy. What does this mean for me? And I know this can be a huge hassle for businesses that have their stable business and looking at how I'm going to adopt this. And I would say one thing. You don't even need to do a bunch of research. You just need to find a company you think is a relevant partner, explain to them how you do business, how you transact, and let them tell you if they can enhance your offering. And the beautiful thing about this today, I think, is that right now here we have people from the traditional financial space and from the DeFi world. I think it's a beautiful opportunity for you guys to talk to each other and see how we can help each other out.
Can I add something to this? And I think all around the world, in order to get more traction to the people regarding stablecoins, regarding Bitcoin itself, you have to preach what actually Luka says, and is make technology invisible. If you try to bring someone and your first selling speech is, I have a super secure technology that you have to just remember 12 words, and no one is gonna take your money, and your money is gonna be with you, and goes to a blockchain, and it's super encrypted and stuff. Maybe people is gonna be, whoa, I'm not ready for that conversation. But if you bring people easy solution in order to receive money, because it's gonna be money at the end of the day, or value if you wanna take it that way, because that's what Bitcoin actually changed, the way in how you can actually transfer value to anyone else and how you can store value. But if you make the technology invisible, you can actually change the world and change the perspective. And adoption goes towards that. There's a pretty interesting book that is Crossing the Chasm. The late majority of people that are gonna adopt the technology are the ones because they are forced, because there is no other way. And this technology came to change the world and how transactions are made. And if you see the volume of transactions each day just go up and more and more and more transactions. But if you make the technology invisible, you see lawyers with 84 years using Bitcoin. They don't understand how a blockchain looks like, how the protocol works, but they do understand that there is value, there is money, and you can actually keep and transfer the value. and keep your money safe.
Yeah, and also an important part when we're talking about adoption and how it's perceived is actually user experience and change of habit. I know a lot of people that's been working in this space for quite a while will say, "Hey, Luka, it's gotten so much better. Do you remember how we used to, do things on the blockchain? How we used to operate through DeFi services?" And I would say, yeah, you're definitely right. It has gotten a lot better. But ask yourself this: who has it gotten better for? It has gotten better for the crypto user, for the person that's invested in the technology, sees some value, and is prepared to educate themselves. For the regular Joe, that's not the case. It hasn't gotten so much better.
They said it everything, so I'm fine with it.
And just to add something pretty quick, if you want to understand how you can see increased adoption, you can go to Venezuela and ask them why. And it's because they understand the value when you go and you take your paycheck and it's worth nothing, and you take your cell phone and you have actual USDT or USDC or whatever crypto that you want to use, stable coins or whatever, and actually have value. And they can feed their families, they can buy things, they can travel with this. Or ask people from Iran. And you're gonna see a clear difference in Iran since the currency went to zero from one day to the other. Who are the ones on the streets? The ones that actually have the currency of the nation. If you had everything in stablecoin, why? I mean, you're gonna be sleeping like a baby because you have the control over your money.
I want to switch gears just a bit and then open it up to other opinions and positions. In the US, where I'm from, a lot of the conversation about Bitcoin, in addition to some of this nuanced conversation around products and products for SMEs and everyday folks that are able to do their banking better, it's a question of wealth creation. It's also a question of how you can enter investment markets that were once maybe exclusive. Wall Street maybe doesn't feel as good, but I can invest in Bitcoin and I've done quite well, would be a sentiment that a lot of at least American investors have had. Can you tell me a little bit about that and the future of that and maybe what that has looked like in other markets and a lot about the conversation around crypto as an investment alternative that can generate value as opposed to a Wall Street or other kinds of investments?
I mean, in my opinion, if we're looking at cryptocurrencies as a mean of investment, I would say to the people to, do their research, study Bitcoin, understand it. And if you do your job well, from an investment standpoint, I think you will not need to move much further than that. But at the end of the day, the technology behind making tokenization of stocks and stuff like that is bringing actual investment opportunities, not limited just to crypto, to the everyday person. So it's being implemented inside of neobanking solutions, inside of exchanges, and it's becoming more and more accessible and opening up a market to everyday people to have the opportunity to invest, right? And not just keep the funds on their bank accounts, like you said, losing money, but actually, investing it.
Yeah, Alicia, your question resonates a lot with my experience and how I interact with Bitcoin and in general with cryptos. As I said previously, I am a technology-driven person, but I'm not a crypto specialist per se. And that's how I got into. Back in 2015, I was up and coming in my career. I had savings. I lived in Mexico City. And I couldn't, back in the day, open an investment account in any of the local banks. I couldn't do it in the US. So Bitso was there, early days of Bitso. And I put my bonuses into crypto. And I've been holding since 2015. And that's where I got. But to your comment, Luka, is I started, okay, if I'm going to put my money in there, I need to understand the technology, or at least give myself an idea that I kind of understand. Feel comfortable with the risk that I was taking, that I'm still taking. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely one of the value adds. I talked a lot about creating value, like having a product that is useful, and investment is definitely one of them. And I believe if you hold for the long term, especially, who knows? Like, future is uncertain. But I'm very bullish on that case. And it came out from my experience. And now you see Salvadorians, why we're not using it as an investment. I think it's once you invest, it's because you have more money to spare. You're dealing with your basic needs and the Maslow pyramid. You have more money. But as we evolve as a country, we don't need to go to Mexico to open a Bitso account. Go to the US to have a Coinbase account or whatever. We have local companies or global companies that are coming to El Salvador and allow you to put your earnings there. And if you feel comfortable with the risk, go ahead.
I do agree with both of them, and I would add something. And from Gabriel's experience, for example, as a Salvadorian, as a Central America, as a Latin American person, it's pretty hard actually to find good public investment opportunities with low amounts. So actually, being able, with this technology, by 2030, it's going to be trillions of underlying assets actually tokenized. And there are pretty good examples of tokenized D shares or X shares that actually are shares of US company, of the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. So that's a pretty good case of use for Latin America. Actually, people that can invest in their companies as a safe product, but also, and as Luka says, the technology must be seamless in order for them to understand. I have shares from Apple, from Tesla, from whatever. They are not technically shares, but they represent an underlying asset. So they have shares. At the end of the day, they have the rights over the shares. So that's what they need. Investment opportunities. They need financial products. They need to access to or to make a more equal society in order regarding investment opportunities.
I would underline one more important thing. Although investment, I think, is extremely important and is in many people's the key to their prosperity. But this technology is bringing one more important thing that we haven't mentioned today, and that is self-custody. I think, I had a kind of flash moment a year ago looking at my physical wallet and seeing paper money and coins inside. And it got me thinking, wow, man, we're in the age of AI and AGI, where we're talking about if it's gonna take all of our jobs or cure cancer or both, but we're still paying with paper money and coins. How archaic. And at the same time, I'm seeing a trend, I think cash as we know it will slowly start disappearing. It won't happen the next year, but some countries sooner, some countries later, cash will disappear. And although I believe it's archaic, it represents something extremely important. That's financial autonomy. We must not lose that. And I think self-custody, looking at a self-custodial wallet, I see that as a future cash, right? Digital cash. You take a self-custodial wallet, you attach a payment card to that wallet that respects self-custody standard. That part is extremely important. And you basically get the same freedom as a $20 bill in a digital format. So yeah, also wanted to mention that part.
Yeah. We're gonna open it up a little bit to the crowd. We have a lot of people here who have adopted, who have opinions on it, who have seen things. And so is there an opportunity? Does someone want to say something, add, disagree, agree with some of the content that we've heard so far? We'll have a mic coming around.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. My question is, Luka, you mentioned before that the technology changed a lot for crypto users, but it hasn't for regular users. What would it take for regular users for the technology to change and adapt and to be more useful?
I mean, at the end of the day, it comes to solving user pains. So the first and the foremost part is on us offering DeFi services initially to people that have access to end users. So that's a lot of times companies from the traditional space. Where things get stuck is that a lot of times it's way too expensive for them to validate something in the DeFi space because they say, oh, fuck, I need a blockchain development team. I need, it's too much of an investment. So the first things first, we need to make the actual initial integration Web2 friendly. And then the facilitation of the actual experience on the other side can definitely be user friendly, right? Because they can facilitate it in the same manner that they do currently. Oh, let's look at staking. Put these funds in my savings account and I have a yield of, let's say, 5%. And that can be exactly the same at the interaction as it is in a bank account. You don't need to understand what chain it is on. You don't need to hold some baby tokens. You don't need to do, crazy interactions. The bank just does it for you.
Who else would like to add a question or add to the conversation? Any best practices, any lessons learned here locally in El Salvador, other countries, so that we can continue to learn from each other? Yes, Mija.
Yeah, I just had a meeting with a bank today and we were discussing crypto, and sometimes crypto is still a dirty word, like, oh, crypto, no, we don't want to hear about crypto. My point would be that we shouldn't be talking about crypto, more about payments. So crypto is just a way how to do payments. And I think slowly but surely the mentality is changing, and especially what we do at NAKA, for instance. For an average Joe, we were mentioning him before, they don't know they're using crypto in a way. They get paid in US dollars. Crypto is just a mean of transportation in between. So I think this is the direction we should go. We were talking about it with Gabriel a long time ago, that if we manage to make crypto as a technology and use it in the same way we were using traditional payments so far, we can advance digital payments for crypto to really become decentralized finance. So it's evolution, it will not be a revolution, but I think we are on the right path. So this is my comment. And also banks finally start to understand that, and we see more and more movement, especially in Europe, introducing stable coins by traditional institutions. So I think we are on the right path. We just need to wait a little bit longer, but not too long.
That's a good point. Narrative and communications and reputation matters. Any other comment or question for the audience, for the panel?
Alicia, before you asked about kind of the general opinion, and I think I represent that because I sort of gotten invited here by mistake. And so this piece of paper has, pictures and numbers and letters on it, but we all agree that it has value. And 50 years ago, same thing, people would recognize this as value. So I guess my question is, in 50 years, what are people going to think about this, a piece of paper like this, and where is Bitcoin going to be too in people's mind? Because I feel like a lot of people feel like at any minute it could go to zero. And I'm curious what you guys think. Like, have we gotten to a tipping point where enough people on the planet agree that Bitcoin has value just as much as this piece of paper? So that's my question.
Great question. Who wants to take that on?
I mean, initially, Bitcoin was, peer-to-peer electronic cash, and it has safely positioned itself as one of the best store of values in the recent years. And I think it will continue that trajectory, and maybe somewhere in the future it will become applicable for payments, but currently it's not. It is peer-to-peer electronic cash, so I can transfer value, but it's not applicable for payments. It's not useful for payments as it currently stands, because transactions are slow, transactions are expensive. And that's, and Bitcoin evolves slowly but surely, and that's a good thing. Bitcoin needs to evolve slowly, and I think it will continue its trajectory as far as investment is concerned, and maybe at some point it will be also useful for investment, but definitely at that point it will need to be less volatile, right? If we look at tokenized gold, right now, a lot of people will probably be comfortable using it as a means of payment because they know that the downswing shouldn't be too deep. Well, with Bitcoin it's still volatile, but still less and less. Every bull market we say the 4-year cycle is no longer applicable, but then we're shown that it's still applicable, right? So yeah, hope I answered your question.
On that one, to be honest, I don't know, short answer. But as a technology enthusiast, I like to think a lot about pattern recognition. And the pattern is we need to transact. We need to move money. And if you see, we started, well, I'm not going to say the whole history, but banks digitize the transactions, and they have many limitations that blockchain and crypto are solving. The technology is not there. By the way, great question over there. Like your answer was amazing of why it's not mainstream yet. Seeing that from that perspective, there are so many things that I still don't know, but I see the use case. I see the technology behind, and I'm super enthusiastic around it because we're going to be more digitized. It's going to be Bitcoin, I don't know, another crypto. Can be a fallout and everything goes to hell. It can, so we don't know. But the underlying factors and the pattern recognition that I'm seeing is I'm super bullish around that. And people are pragmatic. They're going to use what they need for the needs they have. And one last thing is thinking about pattern recognition. I think right now Bitcoin the crypto market went up so fast, and then with ups and downs, a lot of volatility. But something that I like to think about is, man, NVIDIA has been public for a bunch of years. No one talked about them, only the people that knew. And look right now how they're doing. How they're going to go, I don't know. But what I mean is it's just cycles. If the technology is there and it evolves, I'm super, super bullish.
Yeah, excuse me, just one point on what you said. That pattern recognition holds very true for me as well, because currently how we transact, yes, the payment systems are evolving, but still we have this system where we have an issuer, an acquirer, a payment processor, and then a bunch of intermediaries. And there's no person in this world that's going to tell me this is the creme de la creme of what we can do technologically wise, and for the next 150 years we're going to transact like that because that's the best way to transact. No, the future needs to be closer to a peer-to-peer solution with less intermediaries, but still some are needed. You need someone to set up the rules, to protect the merchant, to protect the user. So we're visionary looking in much into that direction.
And just to complement, I think, as you mentioned, that people agree that your piece of paper actually have value, but is not agree technically on your piece of paper, is agree upon the standard. And the standard change from time to time. Priorly it was a gold standard. Priorly it was upon the capital markets of London. Priorly Copenhagen. Priorly and so on from the history of money itself. And actually Mayans agreed that the value was upon some beans, but I cannot actually or for sure have a clear answer to your question. But the answer that I can have is that here in 50 years, the standard is not going to be the current standard. And maybe a Bitcoin standard, it's going to happen. Money or the stable coins are going to be back it up upon Bitcoin treasury. I do believe that that's a possibility, but the only reality is the current standard does not work, and it's not going to be the standard for 50 years from now.
Before we move to our final question, we're welcoming friends coming in. Is there any other question from what we've heard today? Yes.
What are your thoughts of crypto becoming super political instead of before having its own life, now getting adopted into mainstream Wall Street, becoming super political? What are your thoughts?
We're just going to ask you to repeat that again. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
What are your thoughts of crypto becoming super political force as before compared to, as I remember, crypto having its own life compared to now where, it's hugely moved up and down politically wise?
I mean, definitely a challenge. It would be nonsense to say it's not a challenge. Before we were, kind of operating in our own bubble, but now with institutions and governments involved, it's definitely at the risk of more manipulation and to political scrutiny. So, yeah, definitely. I don't have a cool answer to that question, but definitely something to keep an eye on and a concern that we need to have inside of the community. Yeah.
I do think that history up to today has taught us that cryptocurrencies or like Bitcoin itself, it doesn't care about politics. China banned it, it doesn't work. The US tried to do it, it doesn't work. I mean, when something actually adds value to the population, politics does not work. And as a general thought, all the crypto that actually makes sense and add value to the population are going to be still needed from people, and the demand is never going to end. So they're going to be immune to politicians and politics itself.
Very short answer. I think for me, what you said, politics, it involves two things. One, what politicians do around the whole technology. And I think it influences, but it's a global thing. So I think once it's going forward, it's very hard to stop it. It's just how people steer it in each country. That is one. And then political can also mean you as a person. Do you identify pro or against the technology and the people around you? And I think that's going to be very personal. Like some people are going to have a stigma, are not going to like it, and some people are going to like it. And eventually, if it becomes mainstream, it's going to be erased, and you're going to need to adopt it because it's mainstream.
Wonderful. Okay, our final question. What would you say is the most or next exciting thing that you're feeling and seeing? Where's the energy? Where's the buzz? What are we seeing right now? And then the second part of that question is, what's its highest and best use? Big picture. What is the thing that can happen in our world if we are all to build community and design around that?
For me, it's definitely building alternative payment networks and allowing countries, governments, companies to build their own payment rails to transact the way they want to transact. I think the technology is here, and we can make it readily available, and we can stop making this place being a guarded garden. And we're seeing 70% of transaction being done through Visa and MasterCard. That's a huge duopoly, and monopolies are the best business model, but usually they're not very good for the end consumer. So this part of the space is the most interesting for me, so opening it up.
For me, it's having no barriers. I mean, people being able to take their money, their belongings, into a hard wallet or into their phones and move into another country, or being able actually to pay someone in Guatemala, for example, and not needing to initiate a SWIFT transaction and pay $50 to pay $20. You know, eliminating barriers for me is the most important thing from blockchain technologies itself.
Gabriel, what would you say?
It may sound a bit dreamy, but I would say like, hey, most of the developed world is still at 50% bancarization. I think it needs what I'm enthusiastic is really finding a new technology that create mass adoption and allow financial literacy development of our countries. In the case of the developed markets, for the developing markets, that's where I'm from, and that's where my passion for technology comes from. So I look forward to that. And for me, it's digitization in general, whether it's blockchain or other means. I think we need to put the gear on and get out of financial exclusion and underdeveloped countries.
All right, well, this is the start of a longer conversation that many of you are already in. So let's give a round of applause to our panelists and to all of you for being part of a community that matters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now let's drink.